afternoon, everybody. I welcome all the leaders to the VLF Festival 2020. So it's a matter of pleasure for me to introduce well-known environmental writer, Mr. Siddarth Singh. Mr. Siddarth Singh is a young, dynamic writer on environmental issues. His background is in energy, mobility, and climate policy. He is the lead analyst and coordinator for International Energy Agency in India, based in New Delhi. He is a graduate in International Relations from School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. He was a German Chancellor Fellow in 2016 and 17. And Mr. Siddarth has also worked at the Energy and Resource Institute. So Siddarth, on behalf of VLF Festival and on behalf of Orange City, I welcome you to this place, please, and that's all yours.
Thank you very much for this very warm welcome. It's my first time in Nagpur and I've only spent a few hours here so far. Just a week, last one hour last night and 1 hour in the morning. I already seen it's a very beautiful city, so I'm very happy to be here. Thank you to the VLF organizers who have invited me here. I know this is the first time you're doing a fest, but it's already so well organized. There's so much interest. I think it's going to be a great 2 days, and you're going to have a great future, hosting this year after year after year. So I'm a researcher of energy policy and climate policy, and I've been doing it for the past 10-11 years now. At some point in the year 2015-16, I started reading, articles popping up about air pollution. And one of the statistics that it mentioned was that every year in India, 10 lakh people, 1 million people die due to air pollution. 1 lakh is also, 10 lakh is a huge number. It already makes it one of the top 2 or 3 killers from any source. So at that point, I wanted to understand that what is happening. Like, it's clearly such a big issue, then why is nobody talking about it? And at that point, I started looking for resources to read, and I was looking for a book on air pollution, and there was no book available. So I started researching it from scientific papers and all that. Then I thought that somebody should write a book about this issue. And then after some time, I realized that person is going to be me, because you needed somebody to bring together all this information, because air pollution can be approached from any angle. You can be a lawyer and you can understand the legal aspects of it. You can be an economist and understand the economic impacts. You can be a health researcher to understand the impact of human health. You can be a climatologist, you can be a meteorologist, you can be a geographer, you can be a chemist, physicist. So air pollution is such a complex subject that it requires a multidisciplinary approach. So what I try to do with the book is, by talking to the relevant experts and reading their scientific papers, I try to summarize it in a way that everyone can read and understand what is going on. Because if 10 lakh people are dying, it should be the most important issue that everyone is talking about, and yet nobody is talking about it. So just before I start, so what happened is that in trying to understand this issue, I drew 10 lessons. These are the 10 most important things I learned about air pollution, which I want to talk about right now. I will do that for the next 10 minutes, after which we will have a conversation here. Before I start, I just want to ask, how many of you have been to Delhi in the winter? So I can see a handful of, I think about half a dozen people or so. Now, for people who have not been to Delhi, and I know you are very fortunate to be living in a city like Nagpur, where I just saw the particulate matter levels were less than 100, it was 60, 70, which is in a safe range. In Delhi, this number on the worst days can go upwards of 900. It can go upwards of 1000. What does this mean? So practically, when you are experiencing life in the city, firstly, the air does not seem like the air. It seems like there is something heavy. If there is ever a bonfire, you will see that the smoke does not rise. It just dissipates there, because it's so heavy that it cannot even go up. That's how heavy the particulate matter in Delhi is. The whole city starts smelling like smoke and there is no visibility. Even indoors, in a room like this in Delhi, somebody sitting at the end would be a little hazy for me. So it's that bad. Now, what does this mean to people? Right? What does it mean to people, societies, economies? That's what I'm going to talk about. So my first lesson that I learned while researching the book is that we must panic. I say this because we had the case of an environmental minister who made a speech a couple of years ago, and he said that there's nothing to worry about. Air pollution is not an issue. Nobody's going to be impacted by it. It's not like the Bhopal gas tragedy. Don't worry, don't panic. And then again, recently, 1 month ago, 2 months ago, there was a Environment Ministry statement in the Parliament saying that there are no studies in India linking air pollution to harm to human health. So this is very baffling because there is a vast body of scientific literature which explains exactly what happens. Now, air pollution consists of various types of particles, but one of the most critical ones that harms human health is PM 2.5. PM 2.5 particles are so small, they are 1/20th the width of human hair. So it is invisible to the naked eye. And when this gets into your body, it goes straight through the filters of your lungs and it goes into your bloodstream and it goes straight to your brain, to different organs of the body. So therefore, we have a situation in Delhi where when you talk to senior cancer specialists, they will tell you that only 10-20 years ago, 90% of all the cancer patients that they had were smokers. Lung cancer patients. Today, about half of all lung cancer patients in Delhi have never smoked in their life. So these are young people of 15, 20 who have lung cancer now only because of this. And then this air pollution also causes diabetes, it causes so many other issues. We don't realize it, but a lot of people, for example, who may have heart problems. This heart problem is not necessarily coming because you're having too much ghee in your rice. It is happening partly because the air pollution is making it worse. Therefore, my first lesson is that we must panic. It's a deadly disease. In a city like Delhi, a study was done for 20,000 students and it found that 45% of all students in Delhi have irreversible lung function. So as in depleted lung function, that the lungs don't operate to the best capacity that they possibly can. I will move on to the second lesson. If we can check the slide, please. Yes. The second lesson is that air pollution leads to grave economic damage to our country. This is a study that was done in 2013 by World Bank. They estimated that globally, about $250 billion worth of economy is being lost every year because of air pollution. This is an underestimate. In reality, it is much more than that because this only looks at foregone income. So if somebody dies at the age of 45, they will see that this person would have otherwise worked and there is some lost economic potential. But in fact, there's also healthcare costs. There are also situations where individuals are being thrown back into poverty because they cannot afford cancer treatment. There was a study that was done in Colombia which found that students or children who were born in high pollution zones, even 20 years later, they had lower incomes than children who were born into clean air areas. Why is that? Because air pollution is linked with lower capacity in terms of logical reasoning, in terms of mathematics and so on. And this is proven, and therefore the damage to the brain is causing lack of productivity even 20 years later. Right? So therefore there's a lot of economic damage. That's the second lesson. We'd like to go to the third lesson, please. The third lesson is that air pollution is a major inequality issue. What does this mean? Now you assume that in a city like Delhi or anywhere in North India for that matter, air is everywhere. You cannot escape from it. Whether you're rich or you're poor, you breathe the same air. But in fact, that's not true. The fact of the matter is that different people have different exposures to the air. So in India, every year 8 lakh people die due to indoor air pollution from burning chulhas like this. Because they are using wood instead of natural gas, instead of LPG. And many of these homes don't have windows in the kitchen. So who gets impacted by this? It's the women. So women and children, as is shown in this picture, they are the ones who are most impacted by it. Similarly, people who work in factories, people who are construction workers are most impacted by air pollution. Somebody like me, because I know this is a problem, I have air purifiers at home and I consistently monitor the PM, the particulate matter levels in the house. Particulate levels in my house is as good as it should be. It is less than 30, which is very safe. So a person like me, because of the fact that I can afford it, I am able to insulate myself from the problem. Right? Therefore, air pollution is a major inequality issue. We should act on it because it is harming the poor the most. Right? So we'd like to go to the next slide, please. The fourth lesson is that even though there's a lot of scientific studies that have been done, even today there are gaps in our understanding of air pollution. So in India, for example, in a city like Nagpur, we have only one central ground-based air sensor, just one. Whereas in a city like Nagpur, we should have dozens. In India, we should have it in every major city, in every small town. That's not the case at all. Most towns, most cities, most states don't have proper sensing, proper sensors. And secondly, there is something called source apportionment study, which means that you do a study for a city like Nagpur and see where the air pollution is coming from. Can you believe it, in a city like Nagpur, that study does not exist. So now, therefore, there is a lot of gap in our understanding of what needs to be done. But having said that, we still know enough that we should be doing something. And I will get to these solutions in later slides. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the next slide is that there is no low-hanging fruit. You know, people often come up to me and ask me, Siddarth, tell me, what is that one or two things that we can do that will solve the problem? I wish there was one or two things. If there was one or two things, we would have solved it by now. Problem is that this is a problem of 10 different issues. Each of them have only a 10% share in the problem. So, you know, for example, if you see here, you will see that industries, you will see power plants, you will see transport sector, you will see agriculture sector, you will see garbage burning, open waste burning, what it's called. You will see a lot of these things that contribute to the air. Therefore, even if we did our best, even if we banned all the cars, even if we banned all motorcycles, all trucks, it will not even have a 10% impact on the problem. Because every issue has only a small share. Therefore, we need holistic solutions. We need to make sure that all sectors are contributing to the solution instead of just one or two. The next slide, please. The next slide, or the next lesson that I learned about air pollution is that because of the geographical and meteorological reasons, North India has worse air quality than other parts. If you think about this, a city like Chennai and Delhi have the same number of cars almost. Chennai has even more industries than Delhi does. Chennai has all the sources that pollution that Delhi would have, even Chennai has all of that. But still, Chennai's air pollution at any given point is only 1/3 or 1/4 of Delhi. So what's the reason for that? The reason is that because of the, so this is a map of northern India. You see that little dark, thing in the middle. That is the Himalayas, right? So in the winter time, what happens is the wind speed slows down, wind direction changes, and because it's winter, there's less heat coming from the sun, which means that the particulate matter becomes heavy and it falls. It just comes down to our level, and there are no winds to take it away. So all the pollution that comes into Delhi at that time, or in North India, this gets stuck. You see this white part over there? This is the entire northern Indian region, and that is the fog of northern India. This air pollution will remain there for 2 or 3 months every year. Right? So this is a very important lesson, and when you're trying to fight it, you have to overcome this particular issue. Next slide, please. The next slide talks about, or the next lesson that I learned is that this is at the end of the day a man-made problem. It's a human-made problem, right? So we think of, for example, in Punjab and Haryana there is stubble burning. You must be reading about it. Agriculture fires, as you can see, is happening over here. A lot of people assume that this has been going on for thousands of years. That's not true. This problem is less than 30-40 years old. Why did it happen? In Haryana, Punjab, these are not rice-growing regions. These are very dry and arid regions. But from the Green Revolution time, we saw that the Green Revolution was actually a tube well revolution. So many tube wells came that we took out all the groundwater and made the region green. Now suddenly this region has rice growing. What happens to rice? The rice residue, once you take the rice out, once you harvest it, that thing is so stiff that you cannot easily uproot it. And because of certain government policies, so there was a government policy which made it such that you only have 2 weeks between the rice crop and the wheat crop after that. So in those 2 weeks you have to clear out the ground. So people have no choice but to burn it. And this rice wheat cropping system is only 20-30 years old. So it is not a case that we have been doing it for hundreds of years. Okay. So So that's the next lesson. This next slide, please. So the eighth lesson is that politics is good. Now everyone assumes that every year around the winter time we see that Arvind Kejriwal will make statements against Amrinder Singh, who is the Punjab CM, who will make statements against the Haryana CM, and this thing will keep going on. And everyone is like, look at these politicians, they keep arguing with each other, they're not doing any work. But I say it's a good thing that they're making this a political issue, because a lot of people assume that the opposite of politics is people working together and we are trying to get good things done. That's not often true. The opposite of politics is often indifference. So if they're not talking about it, then nothing will happen. At least when they talk about it, this leads to some bureaucrats at the lower levels trying to do something about it. If they were not talking about it at all, then there would be no action taking place. So my wish is that there is even more politics. My wish is that the Prime Minister comes out and makes a statement. So far in the last 6 years, he's not made a single statement for an issue that is killing 10 lakh people every year. You can imagine. To bring some perspective, more people die every year, every week. In 1 week, more people die due to air pollution than from all the India-Pakistan wars put together since independence. In just 1 week, every week. So that's how great the crisis is. Next slide, please. So the next lesson is that we must not ignore the interests of the polluters. So it is very counterintuitive, no? Everyone says that if you are the person who is causing pollution, we must act against you. Now that is possible if there were 1 or 2 polluters, then you can act against them. The fact of the matter is there are millions of people in this country who are a part of the problem, and this includes me, this includes you, right? For example, there are coal miners who are invested in the industry. There are lakhs of people who work in power plants, lakhs of people who work in industries. In the year 2000, the Supreme Court of India basically made a judgment saying that all the industries that exist within Delhi, residential areas of Delhi, should be moved. So it was like a judgment that was made and everyone should move. What was the result of it? All the people came out onto the streets to protest against it. They said, no, we don't want clean air, we want jobs. Right? So, even though it was done for their benefit was not seen because their livelihoods are always more important. Therefore, the lesson that we have to learn here, the key takeaway is that we must act in a way that can rehabilitate people who are losing out due to something. Right? So, in case there are entire industries where people are losing out because, say for example, we are going away from coal towards renewables. So those people should be retrained to do other things. If you don't think about them, then your transition will not happen. Then you cannot clean your air if you don't think about the polluters. Right? The final slide, please. And then the final slide is carrying on to the previous slide, is that intelligent action on air pollution is actually good for the economy and it is good for our GDP growth. So right now, for example, our GDP growth has slowed down. Right? It has come down to 4-5%. The question that a lot of people ask is, why should we work on air pollution? We should first focus on the economy. But if we start punishing people for polluting, then our economy is already bad and then there will be even more job losses. But that is not true. If you take the right kind of action, you can ensure that the economy actually grows. I'll give you a small example. A study that was done for wind and solar. The government has very aggressive wind and solar targets that in the next 5 years they will double and triple the capacity. Due to this, over 13 lakh new jobs are being created. Right? So obviously, moving towards greener sources is causing an improvement of the economy. Similarly, if in this room you will see all these lights that are there, they are all LED. They are not, earlier we used to have those incandescent bulbs. These LED bulbs consume only 1/4 or 1/5 of the energy, only 20% of the energy of the older bulbs. Because it's consuming less energy, therefore at some power station where the power is coming from, there is less pollution happening because of these bulbs. So every year, because of bulbs alone in India, we are able to reduce emissions the equivalent of 15 lakh cars. So imagine 15 lakh cars, if you can just wish it away, that is the impact of moving to these bulbs. Right? So basically, as these examples show, intelligent action is good for the economy, therefore we must act on air pollution for health reasons but also for the economic reasons. And now I would, bring you in to ask me any questions and we can have a conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Siddarth. I'm sure that with the input which Siddarth has given about in general, the air pollution scenario of India, maybe Delhi. So Siddarth, in the conversation, the first thing, when I read his book, first thing which came in my mind, that the first line of your book, The Great Smog of India, says, I am not an environmentalist. So, this is the first line, right? So, if that's how you ended up in devising such a brilliant, thought-provoking book on air pollution. That's the first question I'd like to ask you.
So, when I started writing the book, I asked myself, like, who am I? Like, why am I writing this book? There are so many people who have been working in the field for so many years. Why, if I come and I co-opt their work, is that fair? And I thought about this even more. The fact of the matter is I am not an environmentalist. In the sense that I have not spent a majority of my life working on environmental issues and trying to be an activist about it. My role has been to understand it as a student of science, as a student of economics, exactly what the problem is. Right? And secondly, I think this is a very strange situation where a non-environmentalist is writing a book on the environment because the environment is so bad that everyone is being forced to become one. In Delhi, everyone now is an environmentalist for no other reason because I would urge you someday in life to come to Delhi in the winter just to see how bad things can get. It is an education for people. The moment you land, or the moment your train comes in, you will be able to smell it. It just feels very different to be there. Therefore, in a way, I was forced to become an environmentalist.
Wonderful, wonderful. And when I have gone through your book, I found the best part of the book is that with every statement you have a reference. Every statement, if you go through the book, every statement Siddarth makes in the book with a reference like a PhD thesis. That in the back side of the references are given, and it's an in-depth study of. And to take it further, as you have written, that the air pollution is not something which cropped up now. It started way back. In first time, it was noted in 1306, when you wrote that bishops, barons and knights smelled burning of coal in 3006. And they put up a demonstration, and immediately King Edward promptly banned use of coal. But it didn't work. Then later on, the laws were framed to punish the offenders. It also didn't work. So now the question is that now being in 2020, क्या हम वहीं पे खड़े नहीं हैं? Like we have with us, we are loaded with environmental protection acts and laws. We have Air Pollution Control of Pollution Act 1981. We have Water Prevention and Control Act 1974. We have Umbrella Act, the Environment Protection Act. Still, we are struggling. Still, we are same where we used to be maybe 10 years back.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think the story of air pollution, wherever it has happened in our history in the world, is the same. Some politicians will see it and they'll be like, let's ban it. Do you know that fires that happen in Punjab, Haryana, other states in North India, they have also been banned for the last 5 years, but they still go on. It's the same issue that what happened in London back in the day and in many other countries. So banning something does not work. This goes back to the lesson that I had, the second lesson number 9, which is that you cannot just act against the polluters without finding alternatives for them. Number 1. Number 2, your state needs to have capacity to implement a ban. To implement a ban, you will need people to go out into the, trained professionals to be able to do testing, to go out to do audits, to do, to check and to enforce those laws. I'll give you a very interesting example. In Delhi, there was a sweet, a mithai जो मिठाई बनाते हैं. उनकी एक दुकान थी, दुकान के पीछे से they used to let the effluents go out. जो भी मतलब कचरा वचरा होता था वो यमुना में डाल देते थे. Now this is not just one. दिल्ली में तो ऐसी हजारों हैं. मतलब the industry तो will be the tens of thousands. But वो बस एक दुकान को फाइन लगाने के लिए कोई 10-20 लाख का फाइन लगा eventually 15 साल लग गए. 15 years.
That's the problem. We have the laws in place, we have the regulations in place, we have pollution control boards, we have everything in place. The only thing we don't have is हमारे देश का pollution ही कम नहीं हो रहा है. Coming back to the book, The best liner which I liked in your book is a meteorological misfortune. You brought a very good comparison between New Delhi and Los Angeles. That it's not that Delhi mein pollution zyada hai. One of the main reason is that in Delhi, in winter seasons, the wind speed gets reduced, and the pollutants that gets accumulated over Delhi. So I will request you to please elaborate the readers more about this meteorological misfortune phrase.
Yes. So I call it the meteorological misfortune. I was actually trying to understand what is the right word to describe it. So when we talk to scientists have a different way of talking about it. I said, but those different ways may not connect with the average reader like me. So I need a phrase that encapsulates this problem very well. So I realized that this problem is not only a Delhi problem. It exists in many parts of the world. Now let's compare Delhi and let's compare Los Angeles, since you brought that up. So in Delhi, we had discussed this in the previous, when we made the presentation. In Delhi, towards the north of Delhi, the Himalayas, so the winds come in from the south, and the Himalayas are also not just like just one line, they go all the way around Delhi in a way, right? So because of this, it almost creates like, you can imagine a bowl, right? It's like a bowl, like all the pollutants are in that bowl, that it has been created because of the various weather as well as geographical reasons. The same thing exists in Los Angeles also. So Los Angeles is in a bay area, it's like a valley area, and there are mountains around it towards the land, and there is sea towards one side. So what happens is all the winds come and the winds flow over it. So the part below the mountains is where Los Angeles is. Therefore, Los Angeles also has terrible air quality for this reason. Right? So this is a meteorological misfortune, and we are in a situation where because of this we have to work extra hard. It's not like, in a place like Chennai, for example. In Chennai, if they just go to electric vehicles, if they stop coal and use renewables, they will be able to solve the entire problem. In Delhi, doing this is not enough.
Due to the geographical problem.
Exactly. You have to do even more.
Yeah. I would like to bring it to your notice that in Union Budget 2020, this time, you can see that 44 billion rupees have been allocated for clean air initiatives. And 4,400 crore have been allocated to the states that work under clean air. So, I think it's more of climate change budget, Greta Thunberg budget, we can call. And I feel, being an environmental activist, that other aspects of environment like water pollution, wildlife conservation, forest conservation, got a little neglected in this union budget. What's your take on that?
So see, in India, the way we solve problems is that we just put some money on it. Our solution is that let's allocate some money. But allocation of money is not going to solve the problem. You need trained professionals to be there on the ground. That this, when you talk about allocating 10,000 crores or 20,000 crores, does not actually go in capacity building where it should be going. It does not go in a coordinated plan. The reason why China could fight this problem is that under their blue skies policy, they ensure that everything that they do falls under this blue skies program. For example, if you are making a new industry, they will first see does it comply to air pollution issues. If you are making a new city, if you are making a new transport system, all of it has to come under this larger plan. In India, this does not exist. So there is no larger plan to deal with air pollution. You have many laws that will deal with the symptoms, but nothing that can structurally talk about air pollution and environmental issues. So that is where we are lacking.
Okay. One very quick question: what do you think that Donald Trump's withdrawal from Paris Agreement, how it is going to affect the global climate fight?
See, I actually was very pleased by what happened after him. So when he left, when Donald Trump withdrew from the Paris Agreement, it was a very big shock for everyone. And that time we thought the whole thing will collapse and we will have no action on climate change. But once it happened, what happened after it pleased me. Because last time in the Kyoto Protocol, when it had come out many years ago, when US withdrew, suddenly dozens of other countries withdrew. This time, when this time, not only did nobody withdraw, all the remaining countries also joined. They said that USA is alone, the rest of us will fight. Even the USA itself, out of the 50 states, some 20-30 state governors came out and said, we will still follow the Paris Protocol even if you are out of it.
That's a very good sign.
Yeah, it's a good sign.
Good sign. People have started planning.
Happen, yes.
In fact, as an environmental activist, I was very happy that in Vidarbha Festival, we are talking on global warming, climate change and air pollution. That's something very unique. No. So, one very important thing that everybody sitting here शायद जानना चाहते हैं, दिल्ली का odd even formula, right? ये being in Nagpur हमने तो सुना है odd even formula के बारे में, but I have media reports with me where down to earth says that odd even formula was able to reduce the pollution level to 13 to 15%, जहाँ पे apply हुआ. But we have other reports, and in your book also you have highlighted it very well, that there are 80,000 trucks that passes through Delhi every night just to cross Delhi. तो उन्हें क्यों नहीं रोक रहे? Odd even क्यों? So let's hear it from a person who is from Delhi and we are seeing it from the very close quarter. You take on that.
So, firstly, in terms of actual success of odd even, that is debated. There have been several studies that have come out. Some studies show that there has been marginal improvement only for those hours, and some other studies show that there has been no noticeable difference. But I think the biggest takeaway for me was that when odd even happened, the people of Delhi actually complied. You know how easy it is for us Indians to ignore laws. We will ignore anything that we can for our personal convenience. But this showed the fact that people were actually compliant. I think compliance would have been over 95%. That was the biggest win for me. It showed that people are interested in this issue. If you show the proper mechanism for people to contribute, that they will do that. So to me, that was the biggest win. As far as actual pollution being impacted by it, the answer is that air pollution cars cannot have that big an impact. We saw it in the pie chart earlier. The role of any one individual sector is too small. So even within cars, so transport sector as a whole is about 20% of the air pollution in the city. Of this 20%, the cars will have only 5%, of which petrol cars have even a smaller percent, and then of which we have cut half the cars. So you can see in the pie chart, the pollution that caused from only half the cars being taken off is a very small sliver. So therefore the impact will not be seen. But the point is that this odd and even should go with many other activities that we do together. Unfortunately, they don't do those many activities. They just look at one thing. That is why it's not been a bigger success than we would have liked.
Siddarth, I think most of us are aware that the new government has framed a lot of policies and initiatives, like we have National Air Quality Monitoring Program, we have National Air Quality Index, non-attendant cities. Unfortunately, Nagpur is one of the non-attendant cities out of 102 non-attendant cities declared by the Government of India. National Air Cleaning Program and all the same. But I'd like to tell you one very basic thing about Nagpur. In Nagpur, for air quality monitoring, this is for the readers also, we have only 5 stations. Just think of a population of 35 lakhs have only 5 monitoring stations. Out of that, 3 are in civil lines area, which is densely populated. There is no industry. And out of this, only one data goes to Central Pollution Control Board, and they give a statement based on that, the air quality of Nagpur, air quality index of Nagpur. How far you feel that this is correct and what need to be done?
So, of course, this is a very big problem. As we discussed, many cities still don't have the appropriate infrastructure, Nagpur being one of them. We don't have appropriate studies to understand where this air pollution is coming from. Therefore, our understanding of the issue is incomplete. I'll give you a very small example. Have you all played this game Battleship? Yeah, you have played Battleship. So in that game, what happens is there are 2 people in the middle. So I cannot see on that other side, and he cannot see on my side. And then I will tell him a number like A6, and then he will put a pin there, and we are trying to sink each other's ships. Now, without data, fighting against air pollution is like playing Battleship. You don't know what is working, you don't know what is not working. We will randomly keep implementing different rules, and somebody sitting in Delhi will make a rule. They don't know if it actually works in Delhi in Nagpur because we don't have the data for it. Like he said, only one of the monitoring station data goes to Delhi. So this is a very big problem, and we need
also cities across India. As the time is running out, I'll take up a last question. That about NGT, National Green Tribunal. National Green Tribunal came in existence in 2010, I believe, with the sole intention of effective and expedite disposal of environment cases. But often we have seen that the National Green Tribunal is in loggerheads with administration, and also with other quotes. I have a quote from National Green Tribunal, I have a quote from other newspapers where it says that NGT and Bombay High Court clashed over National Highway 7 widening. So, we have formed National Green Tribunal for saving the environment, experimental case. It's not happening. So, is National Green Tribunal bad? You feel that not much to do?
So, firstly, I think NGT is, there are many deficiencies in NGT as you have just explained that our Green Code is not able to effectively implement environmental laws in the country. But not having them would be even worse.
Yeah.
Because
I'm talking about revamping.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot needs to be done to revamp it, and a lot needs to be done to put more money into it. Unfortunately, what happens is there's not a lot of political support for an NGT, because often the perception is that NGT is imposing costs on industries and all, and it's eventually industries who win or industrialists who help governments win elections or politicians win elections. It's not the environment. So there is not enough political backing, but the fact of the matter is, like NGT right now exists in only like four locations. It should exist in every state. There should be more proactive implementation of laws. In NGT itself is a good idea, because unlike other laws, so the usual court system, after a crime is committed, you go to them and then they resolve it. With the environment, we cannot first be like, let the environment be spoiled, then we will. So NGT actually, you can proactively go and be like, there's something going to happen. And that could impact the environment, so stop it before it happens. That's the big value that NGT brings that other courts will not.
Wonderful, Siddarth. It was wonderful talking to you. There are not many questions, but we are running out of time. So now I think we'll go to the audience, and if anybody has any questions, we can pick up a few questions from the audience. If
I have one question. Is that in the layman language, what is that one thing that Los Angeles does to improve its quality that people don't?
Yes. So Los Angeles did a host of things, not just one thing. One of the key pollutants that Los Angeles used to have back in the day. Right now they still have bad air quality, but it's not as bad. The main issue came many decades ago. At that time, ozone was the biggest polluter there. Ozone came from refineries. Ozone came from certain type of power plants. So they dealt with that issue and they were able to more or less handle this problem. But that's the thing, air pollution is unique everywhere. So what the problem in Los Angeles is not the problem in Delhi. Yeah. Exactly. But they did a good job in addressing this aspect despite the meteorological issues.
second question from the audience, please. Yeah. Can you give the mic to the young? You can ask a question. If you have a question, you please ask.
Don't you think that regarding pollution, we lack the communication between the system and us?
Absolutely, there is no doubt about that. In fact, forget between government or the system and us, even between the government departments there is no communication. Very small example, during the last year, on the day of the worst air quality in Delhi, there was the government of India itself, some department, environment departments were saying it's so unhealthy that you should not go out, you should not be doing any physical activity. Meanwhile, another department, Home Ministry, was organizing the Run for Unity.
Madam, you wrote in your book
Yeah, exactly.
that the absence is a problem somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So they are not communicating between themselves. This is a big bridge to.
Thank you.
Haven't read your book yet. It's good that you have made this, I think, in terms of lessons through which you are trying to find out what can be done. I feel, look, some of these lessons that you have mentioned are themselves linked. So just to give an example.
Sir, come to the question.
Yeah, I'm just coming to all I'm just going to say is what is his take on it. Okay, that's all. Because it's not just, as I said, one solution fits all. Okay, so if you look at the interlinking between, for example, pro-economy, pro-growth, and you talked about the stubble burning, where the Green Revolution changed the pattern of agriculture as a cause. Okay, so if you look at what is economy, what is growth, the basic definition, basic understanding, if you know what is the paradigm of development that will be sustainable, environmentally sustainable. So I think the entire question is not just how you solve this, it is a basic question of what paradigm you need to choose to do that. What's your take?
We want to be as a nation, as well we want to be as an economy. right? So I'm not saying it's growth versus environment. The fact is that countries that have prospered around the world have been able to bring environment into their economic development paths, so that therefore they have been able to reach a level of greater industrialization, greater whatever, but their environment is still better than ours. So we should draw lessons from those and we should have a more comprehensive plan. I agree with that.
Okay, we'll have last two questions. One, sir, to get a solution of this pollution.
Absolutely. So see, we need governments to act. So the biggest thing that you can do as an individual is vote. Keep this in mind whenever elections talk about this issue. Make sure that politicians are responding to what you say. That's the number one. But regarding other things that you can do as an individual, I think the focus should be on trying to avoid excess consumption that you don't need. Ensuring that in your own homes you live a very energy efficient, in an energy efficient environment. For example, if you're purchasing an AC or purchasing a fridge, make sure it has a 5-star rating. That means that a 5-star rated fridge, for example, consumes only half the energy that is consumed by a normal refrigerator in the market. Which means that you will be reducing 50% emissions somewhere else, like at the power station. So there are many things that you can do as an individual to make sure that you're using things around you in the most efficient manner, and anything that is not needed, you're actually actively going out of your way to not consume it. So if you can cook at home versus order, you should try to do things that minimizes activity, and this is true especially in a city like Delhi, because in Delhi your action can literally lead to differences. In Nagpur maybe it's a little already decent there. So
yeah, the guy was trying for since long past.
People who don't have basic amenities, by the time they get, so don't you think India is just kind of designed to fail? By the time we know that this is a problem, it would be too late.
I will disagree with that. I don't think India is a loss. If I get into the success list, it will be very long right now, but I assure you that we have acted on environmental issues in the past and we have succeeded. And with this kind of proposal that we are working currently, me and several of my colleagues, we work with the government of India. We are able to actually see the implementation of many of these things, and I don't think India is a lost cause. If we think that, then we are definitely going to be a lost cause. So,
and the last question from the ladies.
I know the government's not looking at. As someone who has spent my life, actually studying rural distress, I see now that a lot of that has to do with climate change. Do you think there is an understanding there? And how are we ever going to make politicians understand that poverty issues like these can actually be solved if you get climate change?
Absolutely. I think climate change is turning out to be one of the biggest disruptors. A lot of communities, a lot of people are being impacted perversely, both economic impact as well as health impact and so many other aspects of their livelihoods. I think the government's understanding of this needs to be bridged, especially regarding what needs to be done, because right now the government's focus is on expanding wind and solar. That is the primary, when we think of what is the government doing for climate change, this is what they talk about. This is a very good thing that they're doing, but this is not nearly enough, right? So because you have a low-hanging fruit, you are ignoring everything else, and that is what the problem is. And I completely agree that you need to build resilience among villages, among communities, and we need to ensure that there is equity within India. Often even in the same country, think of the US and Norway and so on, which are consuming a lot of energy, and our arguments internationally in climate change forums are developed versus developing. But think about it within India itself. Within India itself, the poor communities are not consuming enough energy. They're not consuming enough. Whereas in the same country, you have people like us who may waste energy. So we need to bridge these several gaps.
I would love to continue it. So many people are raising hands, but I have been giving continuous message from the organizer. Let's stop the question and answer series. We are running out of time. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Siddarth Singh is available in the lawn, and his book is also available. You can have your question directly to Mr. Siddarth Singh after this session is over. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for making this not so a very serious topic very interesting. It has been one of the most rewarding sessions till now. On behalf of VLF, we wish to gift you with a book as a token of manufacturer, exporter of quality stationery products. The gift also contains the book by the local author, the V author. I request the V author to please present our guest, Mr. Siddarth Singh, with the gift.